everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from irsportsdaily.com. I'm your host, Greg Flammang, and with me, as always, is Jamie Uyeyama, Jamie University. We have a fun show today. We're going to be talking about off-season priorities for the Notre Dame offense, what they need to do, to build off of what they did last year. Obviously, last year it was very up and down, not a lot of points per game, not a lot of explosiveness from the running game or the passing game. So we're going to talk about what they need to do there. Then replace some offensive linemen, Michael Mayer, and that sort of thing. So thanks for being here. Thanks for tuning in so far. If you're watching on replay, thank you also for tuning in. If you like what you see, like what you hear, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you never miss a show. You don't want to miss a show ever. It's like the worst thing you could do is miss one of our shows. CFB Hertz says, good morning, all. Good morning to you. CFB Hertz, thank you for joining the show. CFB Hertz has has his own priority. Priority number one was strengthening the quarterback room. Big check. If we can fill both guard spots, we should be a top 5 offense. I think we're going to talk about that second one coming up here soon. So, Jamie, first of all, how are you doing? How are things? How are things? Enjoyed the show yesterday, Power Hour with Mike. A lot of 2024 talk, and there's a lot of stuff going on. So you're gonna want to check out irsportsdaily.com for a lot of updates on 2024 recruiting and that sort of thing. It was a good one. It was a good one, Jamie. I enjoyed the show. Did a little Q&A session, and you talked a lot about some of the things that we're going to talk about today, but not everything. All right, so let's jump into it. Right. And CFB Hertz talked about strengthening the quarterback room. And I think the number one priority for me is, and I think for you as well. And you put this, and before we get into it, I do want to plug Jamie. He has an article up on irsportsdaily.com talking about the priorities. And so if you like it in written form, you can check that out. Go to irsportsdaily.com and look at that. So integrating Hartman to the offense. Right. And I think for me, when I think about this question, and this priority, I think about what does the offense want to be, right? What can they be with Sam Hartman as the quarterback, assuming he wins the job over Tyler Buchner? I think if for whatever reason Tyler Buchner was the quarterback, I think that answer is pretty obvious, right? You're gonna lean into the running game, you're gonna lean into play action passing and that sort of thing. But with Sam Hartman, it's more of an open question, right? Are you going to be throwing the ball 35 to 40 times a game? Are you going to be more of a like 28 to 34 throwing the ball times a game? Do you want to be more of a drop back passing team? Do you want to be more of a play action team? How much of the running game you're going to lean into? How do you keep the balance of you have a stable of running backs and you have a quarterback who is used to throwing it, 50 plus times a game at Wake Forest, right? So I think that's a pretty big open question. How do you see this playing out there, Jamie?
I think it's got to be kind of a balance, right? It's got to be a balance where I think one of the things is like one of the reasons why if I was Sam Hartman, I would want to be at Notre Dame is because you're going to have a running game. You're going to have more of a running game to lean on. You're going to be able to, that's not something you're going to be in a lot more situations where it's third and medium, third and short than you are going to be in third and long, which he was in probably a lot more at Wake Forest. So I think when you look at because of that, and when you already know you have definitely two backs that you can count on as inside runners. You got two like really fine tackles. You're going to be a team that runs the ball. Like you're going to be a physical team. They're not going to sling it. They're not going to be like a 60% pass team. That's never going to be them. So I think it's you're going to add in what Hartman does to the offense more so than just building completely around him, right? So that's going to be the key. It's like, well, now because he's a guy who obviously threw the ball deep, like as I think, as much as anyone, right? He was like fourth in like a deep ball passing percentage. He led the nation in average depth of target. So you can stretch the field more. You can do some of these things more with him. He throws a great back shoulder ball, like really just an accurate, gives this guys a chance to make plays. So you're going to incorporate some of this stuff into what he can do there. He's a great RPO decision maker. You're going to incorporate some of that stuff. At the same time, I don't think they should get away too far from the identity that they had, because I still think that is the strength of the team, and you still don't know what you have at receiver. That is key, right? So it's like, if all this, I mean, it could be different than maybe in September we're talking about like, oh, Jaden Thomas is going to be a star, or Lorenzo Styles is got over that mental block, and all of a sudden he's becoming the guy that people think he can become. Caleb Smith is just having a monster year. Guy averaged 18 yards a catch at Virginia Tech, and he's like this big play back shoulder guy for Notre Dame, and so on and so forth. Well, if that's the case, then obviously you're going to probably throw it more than you think, than you would assume. And the key is kind of finding that balance. And that's part of the reason when we're talking about the schedule later on, is like they got to find that. But some of the stuff they're not going to find until the actual season, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, because you don't really know what works until you get into, in a live game situation where the defense doesn't know, like Notre Dame's defense, they know what Notre Dame does, right? So it's a lot easier. You're not game planning, you're just running plays and that sort of thing. Like when you're actually game planning, it's important to remember, like Notre Dame's offense, Sam Hartman signed up to play in this offense, right? And what it is and everything that, he saw it, right? He's seen Notre Dame play, right? He has a TV, he has YouTube, he can check it out. It is interesting. Notre Dame. So Sam Hartman, I've seen him go under center on quarterback sneaks, right? Not really under center ever, right? And Notre Dame is an under center team. So what that tells me is like, look, there are times when he's going to have to turn his back to the defense and run play action and that sort of thing. How can he do that, right? How good is it? We don't have really good evidence for how he is in that kind of environment. Like that's something that he needs to get used to, right? He needs to get used to the fact that there are going to be plays designed to throw to the tight ends. He hasn't thrown to the tight ends very often. He has to get used to the fact that, like, hey, this play needs to go to the back, out of the backfield, right? Like that is important. That was a huge part of what Notre Dame did last year with the zone read. They would, whether it was Lorenzo Styles or Chris Tyree or Logan Diggs or whoever, like wheel route back out of the backfield and then another swing route, or like a post wheel swing. Like he needs to be able to make those multiple reads. Not really. So he can go through progressions at Wake Forest, but different level reads at Notre Dame, much more so than at Wake Forest, where it's just like vertical. Which vertical do I want? What do I want to pick out? Yeah. Right. So those are things that he has to get used to, and integrating him into that and finding out what they want to do. And the other part too, I think, is not just Hartman, but what do they then do with Buckner? Is Buckner? Do they want Buckner to be more like running the offense in the way that Hartman does, or do they want Hartman to run the offense at a higher level than, say, Drew Pine or Tyler Buckner? Like how they develop Buckner from here, to me, is a very interesting question. And we talked about it last offseason. Like I do think that Tyler Buckner was brought in to be a Sam Hartman style quarterback. I do. He played that way in high school, right?
Yeah.
As a junior, right? Like they threw downfield a lot. Like, how do you think? And that to me
is
he's
not a scrambler. That's something we talked about. He's not a guy who's like always looking to use his legs and stuff. That wasn't. Look at how many times he got like pressure in his face, hit. He threw the ball really well. Like I was looking at his numbers, and he didn't qualify because he didn't have enough attempts or whatever, drop back attempts, but he would have been fourth in PFF grade in under pressure last year if he qualified. Like, so he's a guy who will sit in the pocket, take a hit, make a throw, and obviously he made like a couple of like brilliant ones during that game. So that's it doesn't have to change that much. The only thing you would change is the the designed runs. And not that
Yeah.
Hartman, you can run with him, and you could certainly do zone read, and you could do some of the stuff. And he had some stuff that he, they did run with him, design runs. He scored like a lot of touchdowns on the ground. But you're not going to be doing as much of the, when they were doing that kind of, misdirection counter with H-back and Jaden Thomas kind of coming around and swinging around the end, and he's following. That I don't see them doing. Like, maybe they sneak it in, but not something a regular part of the offense. That not for sure. I can't see that happen.
Yeah, like the first touchdown in the bowl game, right? Like they run quarterback counter, basically. They fake the pitch, they pull the guard, and it's open. Like, it's 15-yard touchdown. Like, Notre Dame's not going to do that with Sam Hartman, right? Like, that's
they did try to run that one time with Jack Cohn. It did went terribly because he's not the guy. So I could see maybe like them doing something like that. Every once, every kind of
I shouldn't say.
Everybody remembers that Reese.
I really shouldn't say. Well, not just that, but the Reese touchdown against Michigan. They tried. They did try. It was 3rd and 6 against Florida State in the opener, and they tried they checked to it. They checked to quarterback draw.
And Hartman has a lot more chance of success than a Jack Cohn there.
That's a good point.
I would say.
Fair point. All right, and so part of this too is we'll jump into the wide receiver discussion then. Like another priority, a big priority for Notre Dame is creating big plays at wide receiver and more yak yards. But this was what you highlighted in your article. And this is my idea. We could talk about the big plays and that sort of thing. But in my view of it, I think Notre Dame is, everyone kind of thinks like you need to find your number one guy, like the number one. In my opinion, I think you need to get everyone ready to be the number one guy. Because I don't think that this offense will be as good as it can be if you're like Caleb Smith is the guy, or Jaden Thomas, or Tobias, or Lorenzo Styles, or whoever. I think they all need to be ready to be kind of the alpha at different times because of the way that Hartman spreads the ball around and that sort of thing. I think I want their mindset all to be, I'm the guy. And that's obviously not always the case, right? Like when you have Michael Floyd on the 2011 team, Theo Riddick isn't out there like, oh no, I'm the guy at receiver, right? Like no one's thinking that. The 2015 team, right? Will Fuller is the man, right? But I don't think this offense has that. And I think they all have their own. I think this year you could see multiple games where like Caleb Smith 7 for 115. And then the next week, Jaden Thomas, same numbers, and then Tobias, same numbers. Like that's what I think. Like they all should go into every single game feeling like I could go big in this.
You could be the number one today.
Right. So, go ahead, Jamie.
Well, I think so. Like the 2021 team is a good example of that because, I mean, technically, you would say that. Kevin Austin was wide receiver 1, but he really wasn't a true wide receiver 1. I mean, you could say at maybe the last like 6 games of the season, he played closer to it. But he really, it actually kind of sucks because if he would have stayed another year, I think then he would have had a chance to. But I mean, here's a perfect example of like, so, they've had guys who've been not just like, the guys they can count on in every situation, but big play guys. Like, so they only had 19 catches of 20 yards or more from the receivers last year. Right. And I mean, Chase Claypool in 2019 had 23 on his own. I mean, that was like top 3 in the country. So that's obviously really good. Will Fuller had 21 in 2015. Boykin had 17 in 2018. Well, I don't know if they have a Claypool or Fuller or even a Boykin, right? Like I don't know if they have that. But last year they had Kevin Austin who had 15, and then Michael Mayer had 12. So those combined guys, and then you add in the piece by the other guys. That's probably what you're looking at, and I think that's what I kind of see more is like probably of a 2021. I think it would be awesome if somebody did emerge as like this guy that was like, oh, you knew this guy was going to go off. Like he was going to get you, 6 catches for 90 plus every game and, a touchdown. Like, if you have that guy, great, but they might not have that guy. And I think that's probably like more realistic. Either way, they shouldn't have things where all of a sudden, like, Jaden Thomas is good, week 2, and then he doesn't have a big game again until week 10. Like,
Right.
They need more consistency from that. Or even if, like, Jaden Thomas maybe didn't have a day on this day, but he still had three for 75 and a touch, right? Like, that's what you kind of want from some of this. And I think the fact that we always have to kind of mention Jaden Thomas shows how much he is really going to be counted on to be a guy who takes that next step.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be integral because of the many roles that he can play, right? Just like the inline stuff, like he's such a good blocker too. He's a big guy. You can put him in the box, kind of like almost like an H-back, right? Like almost like a tight end. Like on a couple of the broadcasts this year, like they thought, like, oh, here's a tight end running down the field. It's like, no, it's Jaden Thomas.
Yeah. Kind of like a better Ben Skoranek is what I would kind of classify him as.
I mean, frankly, it doesn't even to be better, right? Like Ben Skoranek is a pro, right? He's a pretty big.
But I just mean, like, I think there's more. I think Thomas has more, like, I mean, we'll kind of lead into the other thing with, like, yards after the catch ability than a Ben Skoranek. And that's where I would kind of say that he has a chance to kind of separate himself. I mean, Jaden Thomas is going to play in the NFL. He's 100% going to play in the NFL. He'll be drafted. He'll be a guy who plays, I think, for multiple years because he can be this piece. He'll go to the right team. Especially, I think that's why Ben Skoranek gets drafted in the 7th round. If he gets drafted by the wrong team, he's a nobody who probably gets cut. He gets drafted by the Rams. I mean, he's this Swiss Army knife guy that's, being used in all these ways. And I think Jaden Thomas, it will probably happen if he goes to the right team, that he'll have a long career. But I think with Thomas, and that's what I kind of see too, I think he is a key guy to get more chances to make plays after the catch because he's got that ability, right? He's got that ability. First of all, he's big. He's tough to tackle. He's like a little shiftier than you expect. And I also think, like, Lorenzo Styles, like, you got to find a way to get a guy like him going because he's the one guy that, like, consistently, like, he's tough to tackle. He's very tough to tackle and he's fast, right? Like, so, and barring that, or like barring one of these like freshman guys to do it, because Colsey is not going to be a big after the catch. Caleb Smith, not really, right? Like, it's going to have to be probably those guys and the running backs, really, right? And I think they need to throw the ball to the running backs more than they did, right? And I know Tyree got like 25 catches or whatever, 24 catches, but like obviously he wasn't a guy breaking tackles, right? He wasn't a guy or making enough guys miss. So whether it's Diggs, I think Estemi, I think especially throw some screens to Estemi, get this guy into space. I mean, he's going to truck a DB, right? And JD Price, perfect example of like, that's a guy, whenever. So I think that's like a chance to do it. And I highlighted in the article, like Notre Dame had like 1,200 yards after the catch last season, right? Which is not good. It's not horrendous. It's not like the worst, but it's definitely not good. Mm-hmm. But like to show you the difference, like USC, which is like the best, they were the best at 2,600 yards. Like it's ridiculous. Like that's
more
like
than double.
Yeah, right. So that's just kind of where you need to get to, right? And that's how hard it that's, and not everyone's in it. It's not like, Ohio State didn't have like, they had like, I don't know, 1,800 or whatever they had, right? But it's like the fact it'd be that big of a gap between the best and that's not good. They need more.
Yeah, like Notre Dame under Reese, and I'm just, this is anecdotally now, just like thinking about it. Like they've always been an at the point of the catch type team. It's like he schemes up a play and it's at the point of the catch, right? And that's where the play is made. There's not a ton of guys like on the run in space. a crosser over here, and it's like the defense is completely just like out leveraged, and a guy's just running up free. I mean, they did a little bit of it, right? There's not like there's none, but to the point, like it's just like Notre Dame obviously needs more. I have a suspicion. I don't know if it's a take or whatever. I have a suspicion that the wide receiver core for Notre Dame is going to be viewed much differently coming out of the spring than they currently are right now, because I think they're seen as a liability, and nationally. I mean, maybe with even within the fan base, but nationally, I think that's true. And the reason for that is because of quarterback, yes, but they don't really throw the ball. They're not throwing the ball that often, right? Like how many times they throw the ball against Clemson? Like barely. Like it's like you're not, like the Stanford game was really not good on that front, right? Guys open, not getting hit, and it's just like missed opportunities over and over again. And I, honestly, like I've been thinking about it in terms of the difference between the 04 Notre Dame offense and then the 05 Notre Dame offense. Like no one would have been excited about Jeff Samardzija going into 05. No one would have been excited. No one would have been excited about Maurice Stovall, who's going to be a senior, who hadn't really shown anything for the first 3 years. Anything that's like, I'm going to catch 70 balls for 1,200 yards, right? Like no one saw that coming. Now, I don't think Notre Dame's offense is going to produce that, but it's just like, whoa, like Notre Dame has a ton of weapons on offense. Like who knew? Who saw this? Like, and I think Notre Dame has a chance for that at wide receiver. I think,
and because the quarterback is just better,
and like the quarterback is better, right? And I don't think Notre Dame will be as afraid to throw certain passes the way they would. Not I don't want to say afraid, but it's like we haven't repped this enough with Drew Pine or Tyler Buckner to say we're comfortable calling a route concept in a play.
Yeah.
In the game.
Well, I mean, Greg, we went over it a million times during the season. There were like calls where like Tom Reese was like, well, I can't call this anymore in the game because Drew Pine just couldn't make the throw, or they couldn't feel confident about it. Right. And, or he just like, we're not going to throw because he's going for the shot play when it's like, take the layup, right? Yeah. It's like he's going for the alley-oop instead of the layup. Like, so that is a real thing that happened. And I'm not saying like, I think Hartman is going to be a guy who takes chances, right? I'm not going to say that he's not. But I also think like you're going to get like, he's going to hit more of those shots and stuff too. So, I mean, it all makes a difference.
Right. And so like guys like Tobias Merriweather who are to the field, right? Like having someone like Hartman opens up the whole field.
Yeah. Right? I forgot to mention Merriweather before, but he's a total guy who could be like, how like Will Fuller had like nothing his freshman year. I mean, he had the one, like
he had 6 for 160.
Yeah. He had like the one big game against Air Force or something like that. Right. Yeah. Like, and like EQ was another guy who had like 2 catches or something like that. And then had like a big sophomore jump.
Yeah.
That's something I could see happening for Merriweather. Like, I think if he was healthy, there was a chance that he could have really kind of blown up. And even if you look in the bowl game, like he was open for a couple touchdowns. Like
he had a touchdown that was missed. Yeah, he was open. So I just think nationally and with a lot of the fan base too, I think they're really like seeing wide receiver. Pops McGee is here. What's up? How you doing, Pops? Rajon is late, and that's okay. Rajon, you don't have to apologize. No problem. I just think people look at the wide receiver position as like as a liability for Notre Dame. I was listening like the cover 3 guys. It's like, oh, Sam Hartman's good, but like I don't know about their wide receivers. It's like, and I understand the take from a national outlet because they don't cover Notre Dame, right? Like they don't cover Notre Dame like we do, right? Like they don't know that Braden Lindsey was on for an 8 touchdown season. If they could just hit him on a deep ball, like, and I think people would view the offense different. I think that people would view the Notre Dame wide receiver position different. So,
I mean, they all picked Clemson to boat race Notre Dame, right? Like, but I mean, and I don't say like you could have picked Clemson to win the game, but like there were things leading up to the game where you're like, yeah, Notre Dame could win this game and they're whatever. But it's because when you don't watch the team and you just see that, oh, they lost to Stanford, they lost to Marshall. Like that's
Yeah.
what you do, so that you don't know the personnel, which is why, like, I mean, I don't mean this as a shot at those guys or just national guys, period, but they just don't watch. That's why when people are like, Stuart Mandel picked Notre Dame to go 6-6 or whatever, and you're like, yeah, he doesn't know the team. He like
Right.
literally has never. He's probably watched the highlights, or he's like, oh, it's a close game between Notre Dame, whatever. I better switch the channel. That's what guys like him do. Like it's
Right.
just that's just what it is to be a national guy or whatever, right? There's very few guys like that who actually know the team, and it's why you're hopefully listening to people like us who follow and cover the team very closely.
Yep. All right. Moving on, and keeping to the theme of explosiveness and that sort of thing. Finding explosiveness in the running game is just as important in the passing game. So last year, Notre Dame had four plays total on the team. Now 4 plays of over 40 plus yards last year, which is not good, right? Like that's not going to work. And in the running game, especially, that was. And look, we've talked about why that is. Some of that is, Estime and Diggs aren't always, the best in one-on-one situations in open field. Tyree isn't a great tackle breaker. And then you have safeties cheating down because you can't get vertical in the passing game and that sort of thing. And so a lot goes into it, right? But going forward, they need to be more explosive in the running game. And then hopefully Jadarian Price coming back from an Achilles injury helps with that. That's just an easy fix, right? Add a more explosive player to the offense and that sort of thing. But where do you think Notre Dame finds this, Jamie, in terms of, beyond just integrating someone like Jadarian Price? Where does Notre Dame find this, especially with Sam Hartman at quarterback?
Yeah, I think certainly, yeah, the personnel, that is a part of it, right? Like, and how it's used. Like, so, Notre Dame was primarily, their 2 biggest base runs were duo and inside zone. Those aren't like home run hitting plays. Those are like, I'm trying to get 8 yards. If, that's what you're trying to, or I mean, you're really trying to get like 4 to 8 yards or whatever, right? Like your inside running game isn't the thing. And when you're doing that, especially when you're doing it with multiple tight ends, there aren't going to be like a ton of big holes that open up where you're just going to do that. It's a different strategy, right? It's a different strategy. So some of it is maybe diversifying what they do in terms of, scheme wise, in terms of what they can do with the running game, and some of that, like attacking the perimeter more. I think that's like part of it for sure. Like, I think it's, one of the things where like Braden Lenzy became a guy who obviously created a lot of big plays in the running game before, and then he just kind of was like not really used in that way, in the same way, right? And so like they can get more from that receiver position as well. And I think part of it too is that teams knew, like, Notre Dame was a run heavy team. You're like, they were very predictable, right? It's a predictable team. 1st and 10. Well, guess what? Notre Dame is probably going to run the ball here, right? Like that's the thing. And you have to be able to like open it up. The threat of the vertical passing game wasn't a big threat for Notre Dame. They weren't like, one of these teams that threw the ball deep a ton. So now they're going to have more of a threat with Sam Hartman. That's part of it. One, people are going to respect Sam Hartman a lot more than they did Drew Pine. So that's another part of it too. And you have to be able to, and then so the other thing is too, is where Notre Dame would maybe spread teams out, and still teams would try to still have numbers in the box rather than out at the perimeter, because they weren't worried about the perimeter as much, because they're not worried about those guys. So part of it is like, if you're going to spread guys out and do like the Baylor wide, super wide splits, you got to be able to run against light boxes and get light boxes and all that too. And that was part of one of the reasons why, like, I mean, in addition to them having, Quentin Nelson and Mike McGlinchey and whatnot up front and kicking ass in 2017, they also would spread teams out and run it and and have things open up there. And then eventually they were like, oh, we don't have to respect Brandon Wimbush at all as a thrower, but teams are going to have to respect Sam Hartman. So that's why I think things can kind of open up there.
And remember Notre Dame used to do that double stack on each side.
Yes.
I mean, it would probably be 11 with Durham Smythe, but they would do the double stack, and then they would run zone read off of that, and then they threw the bubble a lot. And so what you said, like they spread out everybody. It was very open. You get one crease, and Josh Adams. That's why 1,400-yard season, right? Like that's the kind of space that wasn't there last year because of the type of offense that they were, and that wasn't the thing for Buckner or Pine, right? And that's something that Notre Dame can do next year to help out the running game. And this is an addendum, and I just threw this up because as I'm sitting here thinking about it, we've talked about these players, but I think we need to have a little bit deeper discussion. All right, Tyree and Styles. They're too good. They're not too good. Their skill sets are too dynamic of skill sets to sit here and be like, we don't know.
Get rid of them. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Like Tyree. Oh, is he going to transfer? Like you cannot let Chris Tyree going into his senior year, like walk out of the program. You cannot like sit there and not have just a plan for Lorenzo Styles. Okay. Like that is not okay. It is not. Lorenzo Styles, top 100 player. Chris Tyree was a top 100 player. You cannot let these guys walk out of your program. And it's like, we don't know what to do. We can't figure it out. Like get these guys involved. Like we're talking about explosiveness. Styles sub 10-8 100 guy. Chris Tyree's winning 40s at the opening or whatever. You got to do it. You got to just get them. You got to get them involved. You got to design things for them. You have to make them comfortable. You have to rep it over and over again to where these guys are weapons against the defense that you're playing.
Yeah, and it's a narrow-minded thing for everyone to think that one, JD Price is going to be forget about Tyree. JD Price is going to whatever. It's like, well, one, JD Price hasn't played at all yet, so let's wait. Even though I think he's going to be fantastic, I mean, let's wait. He hasn't done anything yet on a college football field. Second of all, the guy's coming off Achilles injury. So
yeah, Rajon brought up a good point here about it. It's just tough.
Yeah, and I mean, so, and then also too, he's going to be the only guy. Like I understand they brought Jeremiah Love in it too, but now you're going to be like, and I think Jeremiah Love can be fantastic, but it's like, well, now Jeremiah Love, he better be ready, because if he's not ready, they're going to be in trouble too. Like, no, you need as many explosive, fast guys who have the potential to be home run hitters as possible. Like, what does it say to like the Styles, the very first play of the season, right? Breaks a tackle, takes it like a 54-yard, play. That was up until the Diggs play. That was the longest pass play of the season.
Yeah.
Right. Like you need more speed on offense. So that's why too. And I totally get like why people are like, I mean, everybody gets like this all the time. They always are like, they want to write off everybody. And maybe if this was Alabama and you had the next guy coming in who was whatever, and you had stacks on stacks on stacks, okay, yeah, fine. Write those guys off. But it's not Alabama. It's not Georgia. They don't have a ton of these guys on the roster. So you got to try to do everything you can to get Styles' confidence back, to get Tyree more confident, to get these guys in a position to win and be successful. It's just a must. So like I see people like, well, Styles, move him to DB or whatever, right? And you know what, maybe whatever, right? But they still don't have anybody else there. So even if you do move him, who's the guy replacing? Who's the guy replacing stuff? Who is the receiver who has the same skill set as Styles, who has his ability that he's already shown on the field to break a tackle whatever. Have like a running back mentality as a thing. Has enough speed to get vertical and stuff too. Like there's nobody else that's obvious, especially now that Braden Lindsay's gone, right? So, and then with Tyree as like, I mean, Estemi and Diggs, yes, they're better running backs than him right now. There's no debating it, right?
Yeah.
Those definitely better inside runners. They're guys who can much better after contact, balance, all of these kind of things too. In saying that, they're not home run hitter types. They're not guys who are going to routinely break long runs or have the ability to do that more often. And I know you could even say like Diggs, well, he had the 75-yard touchdown. He had a 50-yard run another time too. Well, Tony Jones had an 85-yard touchdown in the game. That doesn't mean he was a guy who was going to score 80-yard touchdown all the time.
Right.
It was like that's the things set up that way that it did that, and those are great. But that's not going to be Diggs. Isn't going to be that guy. Estemi's not going to be that. Their strengths lie in other things. So without that, you don't even need Tyree to be or Styles to be these guys that you're like every game. You know, we need these guys to be whatever. You need. They should each have like 5 plays a year that are like explosive, big.
A game.
Yes. Right. No, or 5 plays like each in the thing. So if like
gotcha.
basically like one of those guys each game is having an explosive,
right,
whatever, or like 12 or whatever plays, whatever combined between them. Like one of those guys should be making a big play for you, because that means you either going to score off that big play, or you're going to score on that drive. And you just, explosive plays are like gold. That they just are. And that's why too. That's why, like, you know, USC is just signing 2 guys in this class that are tiny guys. Makai Lemon and who's the other kid?
Branch.
Yeah, right. Those guys are small. They're not big, right? And maybe one of those guys isn't going to hit, right? But chances are, I mean, both those guys are going to be successful in Lincoln Riley's offense. But either way, they just have guys. You get those guys, and why they're so valuable, because they just have a different level than other guys. And they're even going to be, compared to USC's roster, which has got a bunch of fast dudes, they're going to be the fastest dudes. And you just, because of that, like, they're going to have that chance. And that's why too, like, I'm like, oh God, like Notre Dame's gonna have to face these guys. And that's what you want with Styles and Tyree, where they're like, teams have to have a plan. They're like, we got to watch out, because, you know, if this guy hedges, he could be gone, right? Like, and that's missing from Notre Dame. And that's, I mean, part of it is on those guys.
Yeah,
no doubt. Part of it is on them for sure. And another part is on the coaching staff for them to be able to highlight those guys more.
Right. And Matthew Patterson says more speed or more getting players in space. And I think it goes to the conversation we just had about spreading the field and getting them, you know, so there's like, Tyree does not operate well in condensed space, right? Just period, right? Get him the runway. You got to give him a runway. And if he hits the runway, then he can go, right? And that's, you have to know, like, he has to know, like, maybe it's just one cut, but like, that's what it is. If once he starts chopping his feet, that's it, right? Like, he doesn't operate well. Like, and you know, it's just, to me, it's a lot of things, like Justin Knox is pointing out in chat. Like, it's a coaching thing. Like, it's not that I'm saying they're doing a bad job, but you have to do a good job. You cannot let these guys just kind of wither away. And it's like, you know, put it on them to be like, no, like, especially with Tyree as a senior, like, he's put in work. It's not like he doesn't want to put in the work. You know, Lorenzo Styles, like, working his butt off and blocking at the end of last year. Like, he's clearly bought in some aspect, right? It's not a pouty thing. You just have to get those guys ready to perform, especially Styles at receiver. Like, Stuckey's got to work on it, right? Like, you got to make it happen. It has to happen. That's why you're the coach. Like, this Lorenzo Styles is the reason that you're a coach, like, why you make all the money.
Notre Dame can't just go get a guy who's just going to replace that. They're not.
Right.
That's not a thing that they have the luxury of getting, right? Where they're just all of a sudden you can get that. And I think Rajon, brought up the Dylan Edwards thing, and it is why Dylan Edwards
Yes,
is a loss.
that's why I
for
thought
sure.
he was one of the most important recruits in the class.
But and that's the thing is and that's why he was so important. But at the same time, I think when you look at it and why this class is important, period, is because, and I don't expect all these guys to be ready right away,
Right.
but Braylon James is going to be a vertical threat. He is going to be at some point, right? Like it would be surprising, like as long as he develops, whatever, he's a guy. I mean, he can take the top off the defense, like Jeremiah Love, right? Like those are important guys in terms of speed and what they can do in terms of going up and just like changing an entire series just off one play based on speed, right? And I think, and obviously having an Edwards type is there, but that's why when you look at it too, when you like that, when you look at what Notre Dame's class and whatever, not to get into the 2024 stuff right now, but like you got to get more of those. You got to have 2 or 3 of those guys in each class at least.
Yeah. All right. Let's transition. There's some open offensive line spots, Jamie. And personally coveted, right? You get to play next to Joe Alt. You get to play next to Blake Fisher, sandwiched in between a returning starter at center. It's a great situation. Harry Houston offensive line. Let me see if this is who I think are the candidates, and you could throw out somebody else if I've missed somebody. Like frontline like the 4 or 5. Okay. Carmody, Spindler, Christophic, and this isn't any order. I'm just throwing as they come up.
Just throwing out the names. Yeah.
Shrouth, Coogan. Those are the 5 that I'm thinking of. Is there anybody else that you feel like the starter could come from someone other than those 5 guys?
I mean, I don't know enough about like where like Ashton Craig is at, but maybe he could be a guy.
I saw him as center. That's why I didn't.
Yeah. But just the fact that they have, I don't know, like I imagine that Coogan is going to be the backup center, but also kind of compete for that guard. So I don't know like where, maybe they view Ashton Craig as like a full-time center and they're just going to work on that. But he would be the only other name that in there. I will say that I look at it and I think, Ty Chan, you know what? Euro 520 here brought up Jagasaw and Ty Chan. Jagasaw, I mean, he had a knee injury, so I don't know how.
Yeah, I don't see it. And frankly, he better be like, if he was to start over the guys that we just said, he better be unbelievable. Because they should have some really good options at guard. That's my
well, I'll say this too about Harry Easthand. There's been only one. First of all, the guy's coached a lot of first-round picks at Notre Dame, developed a lot of guys. The only guy who started as a freshman was Robert Hainsey.
Yeah, that's
one guy. So he didn't have Zach Martin as a freshman, so throw that out there right away. But he, like Mike McGlinchey, Ronnie Stanley, who played a little bit as a freshman, but whatever. Quentin Nelson didn't start. Like
didn't play.
He probably could have played. Yeah, but he redshirted, which is insane. It is insane. And he was like putting up like 30 reps of 225 when he was in high school too. So you got to be really advanced to start. So I would say I would put him in the long shot category, but you never know. And I think Hainsey too, one of the things with him, I would say size wise, I was like, oh, he might have a tough time, but he was always really technically, he was far ahead of a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it. Ty Chan, is interesting. It's funny. Chan is huge. Not sure he's a guard from Justin Knox. I mean, that would make him more of a fit for a guard. I mean, he's a big dude. I mean, you gotta have. That's the one thing with Michael Carmody, which is like, I will believe it when I see it with him.
Yeah, he
weighed 280 last year.
Yeah,
like,
no good.
And I saw him in person. I was like, did you have mono? Like, it was he. I mean, for a guy that far into the program to weigh that much, like, it kind of makes me think. And not that he doesn't play hard when I see him play, but
Right.
I'm like, how much does this guy care? Because you got to really, like, with a lot of offense on, which is why you see like a lot of former NFL guys go from like being like, oh yeah, Jeff Saturday weighed 300 pounds when he played, but he's like, now he's 220. It's like, yeah, you got to work at it to be there. There's some guys like, Blake Fisher is going to be a big dude his whole life, no matter what. But most guys got to really work at it to get over 300. So unless I want to hear Michael Carmody's like 300 pounds. And if he's not 300 pounds or like pushing it, then I give him no shot to be a starter at guard. And then I think with something, I mean, you would have to think Kristofic is a pretty heavy favorite to start at one of the spots. And then I think from there, especially because he's coming back, because he could have went somewhere else, right? And I think from there, right then it becomes Rocco, Shrouth, Coogan, and I mean Carmody. I think depends on the weight, and then we'll see with some of those other younger guys if something happens there. I know a lot of people, like, I've heard a lot of great things about Billy Shrouth and how good he's going to be. And I will say I've heard more positive things about him than I did Rocco after his first year.
Yeah.
So I think it's obviously a pretty huge year for Rocco. Like, this is your chance. Both guard spots are open. You got to grab one of them, because if he doesn't grab one of them now, he's probably not going to be a starter at Notre Dame, right? So that's just kind of where it's at with him. This is a really huge time for him. He needs to have a great spring.
Well, yeah. I mean, if it's Routh, it's like that's 2-3 years that are gone, right? Like, that spot is his. Kristofic would have just the 1 year, I think.
He might have.
He might have multiple.
He might have it. I always forget about the 6-year thing.
Was he a 19? Was he a 19?
He was. Hold on, let me just check it real quick. He was 19. Yes.
So if he's 19, that's red shirt. COVID doesn't count. He would have 2 years.
Yeah. So
he'd have 2 years. So if Kristofic wins the job, you're looking at 2 years away, at both guard spots. Right. So that's tough. I mean, it's a very important spring for Spindler for sure. Regarding Shrouth, I mean, look, when Howard Cross comes out and they ask him like, hey, who do you like? And he's like, Shrouth is a dude, when your teammates are just out there, effusive praise like that says something, and it just does.
Yeah.
And he seems to have the attitude, and he seems to have the kind of temperament and all those things. I just think he's going to win one of those spots. And then with Kristofic, you have basically you would have 4 starters kind of back on the offensive line because Kristofic started a bunch of games, right? So he has starting experience, and then you have the one new guy next to Fisher. I mean, Fisher and Shrouth next to each other could be absolutely devastating dynamic, very exciting. So but that's important, right? And I kind of feel that in a similar way to Tyree and Styles, where it's like, look, with the options that Notre Dame has at that spot, it's got to be good. It just there's too many good options for Notre Dame to be taking a step back. Because, look, obviously it's a step back from Jarrett Patterson, right? Like, I don't expect either Shrouth or Kristofic to match what Jarrett Patterson could do last season, even with the injured foot. But at the same time, like, Blake should take a step forward.
Yeah, Joe Alt should take a step forward. Yeah.
Corral should take a step forward, right? Like, those guys should move forward. and then you can add Kristofic and Stroud.
And it's a little bit like, you lose Quentin Nelson. Of course, you're not going to have anyone as close to Quentin Nelson, but you're looking at someone who is going to get better and build into something. And obviously that it ended up being Aaron Banks, and he eventually became, an All-American caliber player.
Yeah. And then the last thing, replacing Michael Mayer, right? And this is not just the tight end position, right? Because I think Evans, he came in, played well in the bowl game, especially. He got a ton of reps last year. So you see him as just kind of like he can come in and play good football.
Right? You should, no doubt, I would say a heavy favorite to be the starter there and be a good player. He's another guy, shocking, another Notre Dame tight end who's going to play in the NFL and be a draft. Like he's going to play in the NFL. He's a very good line blocker. I think he's going to be even better next year's inline blocker. So, and I think one of the things, if anybody who watched him, I was super high on him as a guy coming out of high school. He was a guy who played quarterback, and he's a really good athlete. He's a really good athlete. So he's somebody, and I think even when he caught that 1 3rd down where he made a guy miss to move the sticks and stuff, he's got some ability, right? He's got some ability. You can't expect him to be Michael Mayer in terms of just that production, winning the 50-50, all that kind of stuff. That is a lot to expect. So, and really, I don't even know if say if Eli Raridan was completely healthy, he would be a guy that I would have been like, yeah, he's definitely a guy to watch out for and stays and whatnot too. But if you still don't know where Notre Dame's going to be at in terms of can they, even with all those guys, it's going to be more about the receivers and those guys growing and kind of replacing it, because Michael Mayer was the go-to guy, right? The 3rd down, you're running a play for him a lot of times, right? Red zone, he caught 13 balls in the red zone last year. The rest of the team combined for 10 catches in the red zone. So everybody needs to step up pretty big. So that's when it comes down to who's going to be a guy that can win on 3rd down, red zone. So Caleb Smith, Colsey, Merriweather, Thomas, whoever, right? It's just got to be running backs, right? It's got to be everybody that really does it.
I think the person who replaces Mayer in terms of what you're talking about is Sam Hartman, because Mayer was the ultimate alpha on last year's offense, and was the kind of the one who's ultimately accountable. I'm the best player on the offense. I am accountable for kind of all this. And we talked about it last year in the preseason, how it's tough when that guy is the tight end. You know what I mean? Just, they can't affect enough. And I feel with Hartman, that's obviously the opposite, right? He's a quarterback, has the ball all the time, right? So it's very easy for the quarterback to kind of take that accountability role. And I think that's where Hartman may have his biggest impact. He's going to have a ton of huge impacts, but him being the guy where it's hey, I'm the man on offense. I'm in control of this whole operation. I feel that's how you replace Mayer the best with Sam Hartman this year. I think that's part of what makes him so attractive to, the Notre Dame coaches, why they probably targeted him over some other players in the portal. Just that accountability that you get from the position and the command and that sort of thing. Just to go back for a second, Rajon asked the question. I think so. Let's assume for a second Billy Schrauth is. I assume he'll start on the right if he was to, because Kristofic's already played on the left. If Billy Schrauth was to win the job, do you see him as an upgrade over Josh Luck?
I think you would see him as the highs would be higher, is the way to kind of look at it. Lug is a guy who played a lot of football and was in a 6th year, especially you didn't see him make mental mistakes.
Right.
That's not where he's at. And then, if you're a guy who's starting for the first time in college football, you're probably going to see some, at least at the beginning of the year, you're going to see some of that, right? Where it's man, this is a really protection or something like that. I mean, they're not like Lug didn't grade out perfect in that way. I'm just saying it was very minimal, right? It was very minimal. So yeah, you're bound to see more of that. But I think Shrouth, I think, certainly has a chance to be a much better player in pass protection. Like if they're playing like an elite 3 tech, I think he's, a guy that I think would have a better shot to kind of match up there. And I think ultimately too, he's a guy who's going to be way better at getting to the second level and getting guys too. And as a puller, I think he can be a weapon. He can be a real weapon. Like if anyone who's watched his defensive line tape, I mean, the guy can move. He can really move.
I mean, your chance for dominance. I think that's what he gives you. It's just the chance. I mean, maybe you'll see some more mental errors and assignment mistakes, but just in terms of being able to dominate, and just to being it, like you said, like a weapon and not a guy who's just solidifying. Like, I feel like Kristofik would be more of a solidifier. I feel like Kristofik and Lug it's kind of the same situation. Whereas like Shrouth has that upside, like high draft pick kind of guy. Kirk Anderson, you asked a question about run defense being good enough for the playoffs, win a playoff game, win a national title. Ask that on Thursday. We'll probably talk about priorities on defense Thursday, and we'll get into that. We'll end with this question from Corey Flynn. Thoughts on Hartman being number 4 odds on favorite for Heisman per Bet Online. So, Notre Dame fixes these priorities. Do you see Hartman having that kind of upside?
I think he wouldn't be number 4. I think it's the power of Notre Dame. What happens? Notre Dame is a public team. Yeah. For those who don't know what public, it means like a lot of the public.
They drive betting. Yeah.
Yes. It's like the Cowboys. People bet on the Cowboys, whatever. Like it's like they adjust numbers for that. So all of a sudden he goes from Wake Forest to Notre Dame. I mean, he's going to be a name, and there's going to be like a bunch of Notre Dame fans who's like, I'm just throwing down money. I'll throw down $50 on Hartman to win the Heisman. Like that'll happen with people. So that's part of it. And they don't want to obviously get burned if something happens there.
Right.
It is also part of it is like, if he was a guy who was putting up the kind of numbers that he did the last couple of years, he might have had a chance. He probably got invited to the Heisman ceremony if he's on a better teams. Right.
Yeah.
So like, put it this way. If he had his 2021 season the same 2021 season that he had, but he had it on the Notre Dame team that went 11-1 and went to the Fiesta Bowl. He's probably, if not getting invited to the Heisman ceremony, he's like the next guy on the list. He's finishing like top 6 in the Heisman voting or something. Right. So yeah. And which is also why I've always been like, why don't these, there has to be people who see these opportunities, because if Hartman is like a legit Heisman contender that goes all the kind of way this year, and obviously his level of play, how much they win, all that kind of stuff is going to play into it. It's like, guess what? If he's not going to be a Heisman guy unless they beat Ohio State, they got to, out of the USC, Clemson, and Ohio State games, they got to go at least 2-1 in those games for him to be a Heisman. That's just the reality of it. So let's just say they do, and he becomes this Heisman guy. Well, I mean, he's got a chance to make a lot of money. And obviously it would be more money if he was a guy who was in his like sophomore year, and then he had a chance to come back and then get more money with it. So he's probably like going to make some money, but not as much as he would. But I mean, he's still going to make a Heisman contender for Notre Dame. Like Manti Te'o in 2012 would have made a boatload in this day and age with that thing. And I know like Michael Mayer and Kyle Hamilton did pretty well, and they weren't Heisman contenders. So he's going to make some cash.
I mean, I think Brady Quinn finished 4th in 2005. They went 9-3.
Brady Quinn would have
crushed. I mean,
I think he would have been, because, and obviously too, he's like,
he might have made the most NIL.
He was like the most handsome dude who's ever played quarterback for Notre Dame too.
Sure.
And
super polished. Yeah.
And he was like almost like a politician in interviews because he's such a well-spoken guy, and and plus he had the big junior year and then head into the senior year. So yeah, he would have made, oh my God. And he started 4 years.
Yeah.
So he would have just, I mean, he obviously made a lot of, he signed a big contract in the first contract. He made some endorsement deals, and I think he's on TV now, but I think he's doing pretty good. I think he's doing pretty good, I'd say. Helping Notre Dame with the fund thing, right, as well too. But so Hartman, I think, he could be a Heisman guy. Like I don't think it's far fetched. I mean, if you were actually, people take the Vegas odds like they're like actually like, oh, is he like actually the fourth?
Right.
He's probably, I would guess, probably closer down to the 10 range of where you would put a guy. Because the other thing too is like, well, he's got to come and these receivers have to improve. He's got to help elevate things. If Notre Dame, at the beginning, I think CFB Hertz asked if this was going to be like a top 5 offense or whatever. I think a lot of the stuff that we talked about today, the priorities, like a lot of that stuff needs to hit for that to be a top 5 offense. In saying that, the offense, I think, has a chance to be, top 10, top 15, and they haven't been that.
Yeah. They
haven't been that. Like, they were 12th in OF plus, the combined FEI and SP plus rankings under Wake Forest the last 2 years for Hartman. So I don't think it's far-fetched to say, like, I think the goal should be, bare minimum, I think you should be top 15. I think you think that with Hartman, and then if the pieces fall into place, I would say, top 5 to 10.
Top 5 offense that Jamie Uyeyama has.
Write it down.
Has predicted on the show. Very exciting. All right. We're going to leave it there. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We're going to be back on Thursday talking about the defensive priorities, what in the offseason, what they got to accomplish and that sort of things. A lot of questions on defensive line, linebacker, safety, all those things. So you're going to want to tune into the show on Thursday. We're going to talk about that. Thank you very much for tuning in, everybody. Hit the like, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when we're going live and that sort of thing. If anything breaks, we'll be here to cover it. So we will talk to you then, and everyone have a good rest of the day. See you on Thursday.